Good morning, I'm Mike Greenberg in New York. Welcome to Get Up on this day after an historic verdict was reached in the murder trial of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. We begin our program today with the reaction throughout the world of sports and beyond. After deliberating for more than 10 hours, a jury found Chauvin guilty on all three charges for his role in the murder of George Floyd last May. Chauvin pressed his knee on Floyd's neck and pinned him to the pavement for 9.5 minutes in a crime that was videotaped and subsequently seen by millions across the country and the world. Chauvin's bail was immediately revoked yesterday. He will be sentenced in 8 weeks. Floyd's death sparked protests throughout the U.S. and inspired a great many athletes to take action. Among those who spoke yesterday was Timberwolves star Karl Anthony Towns, whose team, after defeating Sacramento last night, dedicated the game ball to George Floyd's family.
It was a bittersweet moment that justice was served, but it was served at the cost of a life. It's unfortunate that our city has been going through this so much. But I hope that today was a step towards reform and a step towards just bringing this whole thing to an end for all the families involved.
We have a long way to go as a country. Obviously we have some progress being made in terms of conversations being had and justice being served. But we just still have a long way to go. So it's a great time to reflect and see how far we've come in the last year, with the verdict and in the case. And unfortunately losing a few lives in the last year due to police brutality and just violence out in the streets. So, we just want to continue to galvanize each other and be there for one another as human beings.
Justice was done. But it's hard to celebrate. It's hard to celebrate because it doesn't bring back George Floyd. And so we had somebody needlessly killed right in front of us, right in front of all of us, because we could see it on video. And no verdict is going to change that. And so while it's just, it's hard to celebrate.
I'm happy for the Floyd family to have an opportunity to get some peace, some closure. We have a long way to go as a society. We get one win and we lose. And, sometimes the protesting just becomes, unfortunately, becomes kind of normal for us. And I think we have to change that. We have to change the way that we're policed in this country. We have to change our values and the things that we cherish.
It's never time to celebrate, when someone's killed. And, my thought and prayers go, to the Floyd family. And maybe this will help us heal and, we'll cease with the violence. So I'm just hoping that this sends us in a positive direction.
There was a great deal of reaction on Twitter from across the sports world as well. LeBron James tweeting the word accountability. Billie Jean King tweeted, "Today, justice was served for George Floyd. His loved ones can hopefully sleep easier. The time to collectively examine the treatment of black people, in particular black boys, men, by some law enforcement is long overdue. The path to healing must begin. Hashtag Black Lives Matter." Naomi Osaka offered the following: "I was going to make a celebratory tweet, but then I was hit with sadness because we are celebrating something that is clear as day. The fact that so many injustices occurred to make us hold our breath toward this outcome is really telling." And I bring the crew in this morning here, and among those who will join us today, Ryan Clark, Desmond Howard, Dan Graziano. Guys, thank you all for getting up. And Ryan, I'll start with you. Last summer, in the wake of George Floyd's murder and all of the events that followed, you and I had so many conversations on the show. And in some ways that feels like yesterday, and in other ways it feels like it was a different lifetime. And on so many occasions, we just asked you to speak from your heart, and you were so generous in being willing to do so. And I wanted to ask you to do the same today. As we saw the events of yesterday, what went through your mind?
I think, I could just put myself back where I was. My stomach was in knots. I was sitting on the couch and just watching. And when I heard guilty, I couldn't believe it. And then the judge goes to each juror individually. And I remember holding my breath, thinking, don't change your mind. Don't change your mind. See, because we've been conditioned as Black people, as African Americans, that whether it's justice being served or justice being on our side or black people losing their lives being on the side of right. We've been conditioned to believe that there is no value on our lives. And whether it's 1955 and it's Emmett Till, whether it's 1992 and it's Rodney King, or it's Trayvon Martin, or it's Jacob Blake's shooter now is back at work, or Breonna Taylor, or Dante Wright, who just loses his life while we are trying to figure out if Derek Chauvin will be convicted of murder. That's what black people remember. And there were so many tears. I was on my couch crying, and it wasn't tears of joy, because it doesn't get to be tears of joy when you lose another person. Unlike Nancy Pelosi said, George Floyd didn't give his life. George Floyd didn't decide to be a martyr. George Floyd was murdered. He was killed, and he was killed nonchalantly. For 9 minutes and 30 seconds, a man put his knee on another man's neck who is bigger than him, who was probably tougher than him, who had been through more than him. And as he called for his mother, who was not there, he never once thought, let me value this person's life. So what the jurors did that we will now celebrate, that people will say that they were so heroic and the things that they did were so great because they were just, because they made the right decision, because they did the thing that America elected them and selected them to do. They are now heroes because we aren't used to seeing it. We had to sit around and we had to be grateful. We had to cry tears of relief, not tears of joy, because finally, somebody finally said, 12 people finally said that black lives actually matter, that at least this one black life was taken and we will hold somebody accountable. This is just the start, though. This is not the finish. This is not where we need to be. This doesn't mean that America is healed. This is just maybe now cops will know they don't get to just take our lives, and it's okay. And maybe when yesterday comes and my daughter gets pulled over for doing something, and my wife is crying on the phone and we're on FaceTime and she's asking the police officer, just please take care of my child. Tell me how I will see my child again. And that's all. And I'm not crying because my daughter's in the car crying. I'm crying because my wife is at the house crying because she is in fear that she will never see her again. That's black people. That's who we deal with every day. So for one day, we got relief. We got justice. We don't get to celebrate. This is not an opportunity to say how great it is, how great America is. America is not great again because it's never been great for us anyway. But I am grateful to those jurors. I'm grateful to the state of Minnesota for handling this in the way that they were supposed to. Please remember, they did nothing special. But justice was served for one day and for George Floyd and his family.
Thank you for saying that, R.C. Desmond, again, you have been with us through so much of this as well. I think our audience would just like to hear what thoughts you have today.
Well, first, I'd like to thank R.C. for sharing his thoughts and opening his heart to us, because that was, exactly what I was thinking, how I felt. But yesterday, R.C., when I got the news, the first thing I did was I called my father, and he actually was out walking, so he hadn't heard the news. And I told him what had taken place, and I can just hear in his voice, something that I never heard before. And as a son whose dad is everything to him, that meant a lot. It just meant a lot. But I immediately turned to BBC, because I always turn to BBC when something happens, because I like to get the viewpoint of people outside of our country and see how they're looking at us. What type of lens are they looking at us through? And it took me back, RC and Greeny, to last summer when we discussed this. And this was global. This sparked a global reaction. And so I always felt like they couldn't get this one wrong. I mean, there were protests from Oakland to Iceland, from Brazil to Belgium, New Zealand, countries in Africa. I mean, I saw a house that was pretty much demolished, except a wall was still standing in Syria. And they had a picture of George Floyd on the wall with his last words, "I can't breathe." So I'm telling you this to let you know this was always so much bigger than what happened in our borders. And the whole world was watching this one. So I always felt they
Yeah.
can't get this one wrong. They can't, because this one hits completely different. Now, obviously, as a part of the human family, the brown part of that spectrum, we're used to getting the verdict of not guilty, and so you hope for justice, but you prepare for the opposite. So when I got the verdict and guilty, 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 though I was hoping for the justice, because that is justice.